It's the feminine that gives us our marching orders, and it's our masculine that marches through the fears and
I love
doubts.
that. Can we quote you on that? That's such a great quote.
It
That's
just came through. Go for it.
Welcome to the Sexy and Sacred Show with Sage and Steve, where sexuality, sensuality, and spirituality meet to help you create a blissful relationship that enhances your spiritual path and raises your love vibration for personal and planetary transformation. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're all at. We're very excited today to bring you a very special guest today as our first guest speaker on the Sexy and Sacred Show with Sage and Steve. This is Scott Grace joining us today, and of course my lovely co-host, or host for the most part. I'm kind of the co-host, Sage Taylor Kingsley. So good morning.
or good evening. Absolutely.
Or
Welcome,
evening.
welcome, everybody.
Or afternoon.
I know. And I am so excited that Scott is our first guest. This is just like so divinely, perfectly lined up. I've known Scott for, I think, at least 10, 12 years. I know, Scott, I interviewed you way back in the day, 2012, I believe it was, because I was so impressed by who you are and the energy you bring and your humor and your wit and your wisdom and your heartfulness. And so it's just such an honor to have you here. So I'm going to share with you guys Scott's official bio, which will probably already have you in stitches because he's just that funny. So we're going to go deep today. We're going to go high. We're going to go wide. We're all about uplifting you, about spirituality and sensuality and sexuality and personal growth and being the love and light that you are in the world. So Scott Grace has been described as a cross between John Denver, Robin Williams, and Dr. Seuss. And he's wanted by the authorities for creating the peace, as well as defying the law of gravity with levity. Contact with Scott is likely to be hazardous to your misery, as he has provoked outbreaks of joy in 4 out of 5 laboratory humans. Documented. And it is alleged that Scott's work has so threatened to cut into the sales of antidepressants that pharmaceutical companies have offered him millions to retire. I'm sure you're enjoying that now, Scott. Scott gives keynotes using his stolen identity, aka the spiritual Dr. Seuss, and his feel-good viruses on YouTube have infected over 2.5 million people and more after today. Scott's also been known to practice life coaching without a license, as many of us do. And he fancies himself an intuitive and smuggles wisdom and guidance over the border from beings he calls spirit guides, who are also not licensed and who have allegedly not filed a tax return in several lifetimes or even millennia. And Scott has recorded 9 CDs. Remember CDs? 8 tracks now. Of his original music and comedy, and he presents as an inspirational guest speaker and singer at churches, nonprofits, schools, corporate events, an occasional stand-up comedian. He's actually shared the stage with Dana Carvey and Robin Williams. And his rampage of song portraits, which are custom-made, personalized song gifts that you can get for your birthday, for your anniversary, for a wedding, or just for no reason or any reason at all, have been killing people softly with their song since 1987. And Scott has written 4 books. I remember one about something about laundry that was pretty funny that I bought a few years ago, and I think I might have even written a testimony for that. We wrote testimonials for each other's books that we wrote years ago. But his newest book is what has got Steve and I super excited to have him on the show today, and it's called Mindful Masculinity. And this is our topic today. So before I hand the mic over to Scott, I just have to say one more thing, which is I'm going to read a teensy tidbit of my review, which was a heartful read that made Scott cry, because Scott is a mindful masculine who can cry. And what I wrote on Amazon is, and I mean every word of this, mindful masculinity serves as a revolutionary evolutionary portal for men and for those who love them, to step into a more heart-centered, expansive expression of who they are while they shine their unique light with the world. Brimming with as much wit as wisdom, like Scott, mindful masculinity will reach right off the page or screen and dance and sing and heal and elevate the out of you. Beep. All while you're smiling and laughing and maybe occasionally crying with relief, especially if you're a man, to discover that you are not broken. You are not bad. You are not wrong. You are not guilty simply for being male. You are worthy and lovable and beautiful and brave. And loving yourself as the man you are today is the essential pathway to becoming all of who you came here to be. And that is how I feel about Scott's book and Scott's work. And without further ado, please, everybody, will give a warm welcome and a round of applause all around the world to the amazing, mindful, heartful, soulful Scott Grace.
Oh my God, I've never been in the presence of so many beautiful people. Thank you, Steve and Sage Taylor, and all of you on YouTube. I see you all, and you're brilliant. And I see people stopping their driving, pulling over the side of the road and saying, I got to listen to this. I want to soak it in. And I'm here as a sponge, and you just squeeze me dry.
Let's soak you with some juiciness now, too.
Put some lavender in that sponge.
I know.
And patchouli.
I know we have so much to share, and I want to tell everybody who's listening, you got to hear the entire show today because Scott promises to share one of his spiritual Dr. Seuss songs with us, and I promise to share a brand spanking new spiritual rap about men, about masculinity, and so we're going to be entertaining and touching you every single which way. And Steve will be glowing and holding the space and sharing his wisdom tidbits too along the way. So what I'm really curious about too, Scott, is what inspired you to write a book about mindful masculinity, and where do you see the evolution of manhood, and being a man and masculinity? Where do you see that going in the future? How can that evolve?
Sure. Well, I wrote the book to heal myself of the thought I'm not good enough as a man. And I've carried that thought with me since adolescence. And about 12 years ago, the mother of my daughter ended our relationship. And I felt it all rise to the surface. And for 10 years, I processed not just grief, but this sense of inadequacy. I wasn't man enough for her. And I began to question that very deeply. And then I was called to write this book. And as I wrote it, I felt that thought start to lift and be replaced by the reality that I'm actually part of the next step of the evolution of masculinity on the planet, and that what I had been judging myself as my weaknesses were really strengths.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. I
That's
love
huge.
that. And I think so many of us have, women as well as men, and this is true for LGBTQ and everybody, that we all have masculine and feminine energy within us.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful to be able to own and express and honor and celebrate both and all of those aspects in their healthy expressions, which are quite beautiful. But we have all been conditioned to sort of have a checkbox of these things are masculine, and these things are feminine, and people with a penis have to do more of these, and people with a badge have to do more of these, and it's like ridiculous, So really just being all of we are, loving that inner male, that inner female, and saying, who says that, men can't be nurturers or show emotion? I mean, that's ridiculous. Who says that women can't be strong and productive and successful? F that. That's craziness, right? So though all of us who are awakening, we're realizing that all of these aspects of humanity and humanness are beautiful. I happen to like being with a man who's a little bit more masculine than me. Like, I like the polarity just a little bit, kind of that difference. But I also love that Steve has these feminine qualities and is nurturing, and that doesn't even mean that has to be feminine quality, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, Scott. Like, what are masculine, what are feminine? Like, how do we get
Ah,
past these mindsets and
oh, yeah. In the book, I used the word MASK dash Yulin as a
uh,
way of describing the programmed cultural ideas of what masculinity is supposed to look like,
mhm.
and uh, and then dissecting that so that we can come to authentic masculine energy.
You have a whole chapter in there. I think it's called Masculinity Out of Balance. Is that the
Yeah,
one?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that really
So
resonated for me.
masculine energy grows and thrives on facing fear, embracing challenges, and feminine energy, both within men and women, grows stronger by nurturing or being nurtured. And I like to think of it really simply that the masculine is the left side of the brain, the feminine exists in the right side of the brain, and we're evolving to a point where we're getting whole brained, where we need to use our whole brains to take the next step for humanity.
Right. I love that. That's
So,
great.
yes. And here's the interesting thing. So masculine energy grows stronger through encouragement, through courage. And and for many men, it takes courage to explore the right side of their brain. It takes
Mm,
courage to feel their feelings, to report vulnerably what they're feeling.
yeah.
So it's a beautiful paradox in that the more a man ventures into this feminine side, the more he expresses courage and strengthens his masculine side.
I love that. That's kind of like the yin yang symbol, isn't it? That we have, you know, the dark and the light and the dark, the masculine within the feminine within the masculine. It's like, the boldness of the masculine energy can give women within themselves and in partnership can give them that kind of structure in which to feel safe to do it, that feminine kind of surrender, flowing, intuiting, kind of thing. And then as you just said, Scott, the masculine, needs that emotional and intuitive right brain in order to access the creativity and the inspiration so that his bold, courageous actions in the world are coming from a higher and deeper place.
Yes,
I totally get
yes.
that. Needs to be memed. We're gonna put that all over the world. I love that. The feminine gives the marching orders and the masculine steps
Yeah.
forth
The
and
feminine is receptive, it receives.
right.
And then it turns to the masculine and says, do something about this.
True.
Yeah.
I love the idea of when you're talking about the MASK, masculine, um, and I was reading a little bit this morning. Watching YouTube videos and all kinds of stuff of yours. You'll see a lot more likes on your videos suddenly this morning. um, but I noticed that for me, when I heard that, I'm like, okay, how am I doing that? I mean, it's not anything new to me, certainly, and I've delved into the idea for many, many decades. But kind of revisiting it, just hearing you talking about it, and I think that's one thing I liked about the book was even though I feel like I have been for many decades a pretty evolved male and have a pretty good balance. But I think it's really good, especially now that I'm in my 60s, to look at who I am now. And I think all men can get a lot out of reading your book. There's a lot of areas in there where I kind of went, huh, looking at things in a little different way. And then assessing, well, where was I back like in my 20s and where was I in my 30s? And So it was good to kind of, well, what was my story at that time? You were talking in chapter one about your dad, for example, and your relationship with him, and it made me think about, well, what was my relationship with my dad? It's like, God, yeah, he was, by the way, a fisherman, owned peninsulas
Oh,
Monterey, and a famous steelhead fisherman, blah, blah, blah. And I was like a shadow under him. So for me, my story was very different, but I could relate to a lot of it. And I think most men can relate to a lot of what you put in there. But it was a good revisit for me. So anyway, and the mask part is, man, boy, do we go there. We are, uh, I mean, I have to constantly reminding myself to be real. And it's like, okay, am I being me or am I being my mask? So it's a
Right, or maybe
good
my
one.
father, or what my father told me I should be.
Yes,
Talk a little bit
exactly.
more about the father wound. I want to share with you guys, and I haven't really shared this publicly or anything, but a gentleman that I was in a relationship with prior to Steve, who shall remain nameless, although he has a name somewhere. Um, but he grew up in a different culture and in the East, and his father, when he was growing up, his father would literally beat him every time he expressed happiness. So when he would laugh or smile, he would get pelted across the face. And so this gentleman became someone who was very disconnected from his emotional self and became avoidant, as a relationship pattern of, walls, lots of walls. And it was seldom to really see him smile or laugh unless he was drunk or high, and that would help him kind of let go of that, that wall. But that's like a pretty extreme father wound. But I know that, women also have father wounds and men also have, mother wounds. But I think that the father wound really speaks to the original cause, or an original root cause, for anybody's disconnection with what they, maybe they're disconnected from their masculinity because their father was, a toxic masculine role model. And so then they like, oh, I don't want to be like that, thinking, well, that's what masculinity is. Now I'm going to be like that. Or it could have been the other way where they suppressed the femininity, and the emotional and intuitive and kind of feminine qualities. So it's interesting because I feel like no matter how far we've delved into those ancestral lineages, there's always another layer. There's always another level of healing. So I don't know if you wanted to share anything about that, Scott, but I think to be a mindful man, you need to kind of address those deep father wounds, huh?
yeah, it's true. And I want, through my humor and my stories, my aspiration is to make it safe for men to look at this stuff, not as a project that needs fixing,
Mm,
but as a curiosity, like, ooh, this is interesting.
mhm,
Biggest male wound I see in myself and others is this treating my wounds or my insecurities as a problem that needs to be fixed.
mm.
I call it Mr. Fix It. And
Yeah.
it gets in the way of listening to the women who need just to be heard, because that part of me is like, oh, let me find the problem and let me fix it.
Mm, mhm.
And to look at yourself as a self-improvement project,
Yeah.
self under construction, expect delays, it really burdens you unnecessarily
And
when this could be a really exciting adventure of evolution and expansion and healing and discovery. Men and masculine energy love to go where no man has gone before,
the final
they
frontier.
said in Star Trek. Masculine energy got very high when we put the first man on the moon, while feminine energy said, hey, let's take care of the hungry on Earth.
Mm,
We need both.
we need both, exactly.
But because we've, as a society, have spent the last thousands of years overemphasizing the masculine side, We need the feminine to lead the way now.
We bring it back to balance by
Yes.
focusing more on
Yeah.
Mother
Yes.
Earth and the divine feminine and the goddess and yeah, yeah, and within us and in our relationships.
Yes.
Right, right. Yeah, and I love that concept of we're not broken, you know. Yes, we're works in progress. Yes, you know, the men at work sign, that's cute and that's funny. But you know, we're perfectly imperfect. And I think that a lot of people, especially those who are single or in unsatisfying or painful relationships, run a pattern of I'm not going to be lovable, or I'm not going to manifest or be able to have the wonderful relationship that I really want until I heal all this crap. You know, I have like, man, I've got all this load of crap to heal. But you know, we all have that, and we can be lovable, and we are lovable, and we are worthy as we are now. But no one outside of us is going to be able to be engaged in that kind of a relationship with us until we really know that within ourselves, right? And our self-love outweighs our self-judgment and self-loathing.
Indeed. Indeed.
And we can love ourselves right
Yes.
now.
And part of
Absolutely.
loving ourselves is asking for others to support us and to love us. So, that old song by James Taylor, "You've been better to me than I've been to myself."
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's kind of very true for a lot of people that their first taste of unconditional love comes from their partner. And they don't know how to love themselves, and they learn to love themselves in the context of a healthy relationship. So it's not a rigid rule that first you have to love yourself, then you can have a good relationship. There's all kinds of relationships out there, and they're all different, and they're all healing something for that
Yeah,
couple.
I think that there are certain aspects of ourselves that experience deeper healing in the context of a committed, loving, romantic relationship. And, you know, this is the Sexy and Sacred show. So, do you want to talk a little bit about how masculinity and femininity and the concepts about them, how that affects sex? How does that affect our intimacy with one another? I'd love to hear both of your thoughts. We're all brainstorming, heartstorming here. But what do you think, Scott? Let's start with you. How does
Well,
masculinity?
I don't like talking in generalizations
Yeah.
because every individual is different. And, what you said about Steve, that he has a little more masculine energy than he does feminine, and you like that about him. There are some men who have more feminine, and that's just the way it is. And then there's the transgender, which is exploding. And I love that because it's freaking everybody out, breaking all the rules, and opening minds and opening hearts all across the world.
Right.
In general, uh, sex is best when there is that polarity, when there's a masculine pole and a feminine pole, when there is an active and a receptive.
And that's the
That's all I
theme
can say.
of
I haven't had sex in 12 years. It's been semi-involuntary celibacy.
I hope you're having
And
sex with Scott Grace.
I know I get offers.
You can give yourself offers all the time. You're left-handed,
I do.
right-handed, you know.
It's okay. I feel
Really
like,
hand it to you.
oh, don't mention my hand. That's
You can handle it.
not happening
Hmm.
here.
That's okay.
I have to say something at this point. Sage and I have a very, very strong, not only spiritual and emotional, but also psychic connection. So oftentimes when she's about to say something, or like if you say something, I've been hearing it right before she says it, or sometimes I can tell she's thinking it, but she didn't say it. So I'm almost in tears because there's a lot going on behind there besides what's actually coming out. So it's very interesting.
And,
Oh,
and I
beautiful.
feel like in a way that might be you giving permission to your feminine energy to allow yourself to own your intuition, to pay attention when you get those intuitive whisperings, which is great. I think like as far as there being some degree of difference, I think this is why we see and I consider myself bisexual. I'm like mostly straight, and when I've been with women, I've kind of missed that kind of extra opportunity for different ways of pleasuring. I was like, felt like something was a little bit missing or a little bit too much like making love to myself. So I'm kind of mostly straight, but I've experimented and explored, and I fall in love with, rise in love with the human, with the person who they are. So I guess pansexual, bisexual, whatever, who cares what the labels are, right? But I think that some couples, uh LGBTQ couples as well as straight, or that they're looking for this difference, which is why we will see, like, even in gay couples we'll see maybe one is more butch and one is more femme, or if they're not, if they're both sort of closer to neutral, or more, or they're both masculine, feminine, sort of presenting outwardly, there may be things going on in the bedroom privately that are allowing them to explore those roles. And so, like with Steve and I don't mind sharing. I don't think you'd mind if I share, sweetie,
No.
that if we play with, like, we aren't into anybody hurting each other. So, like, as far as S&M, if somebody's actually in pain, like, that's not our game. Like, we don't want anybody hurt, but we will play with domination things, like who's in charge, and who's master and servant, or who's serving who, or whose turn it is, or dress up, or we get a little kinky. But we both are like switches, so we can, like, I can be the dominatrix sometimes, and other times I'm like his little sex slave, like he's my master. And so we find that hot, like to be willing to play with that, and but it has to be done in a safe way, and all that stuff, and trust. And I wouldn't go those places with someone that I didn't really know and trust and feel that it could be
Yes.
safe
Yes.
to play like that with. But it's also okay if sometimes you see, like, I think with women it's interesting. I follow a lot of my Instagram is at Sage Poetess. I have a lot of like sexy erotic poetry there. It's pretty spicy, and a lot of the people who follow me there and who I follow on that account are into kinky stuff. And what I see is an interesting pattern is that a lot of really successful, almost outwardly male presenting women, like professional corporate, lawyers, engineers, doctors, that they actually like to be subs. They actually like to let go of that in chargeness and that masculine kind of vibe. When they're being sexual with someone, they want to be bossed around a little bit. Yeah. So it's interesting. And I'm not saying one is good or one is bad or what is right is wrong, as long as people are mutually consenting adults and everyone is happy and feeling pleasure in a respectful way, then that's good. But I think giving ourselves permission to allow, ourselves to have desires, like, even if it feels a little out there, or it feels, weird, or someone else, maybe we don't want our mother to know about it, or, whatever, or our father, but it's like, you're allowed to enjoy pleasure in the ways that feel good to you. And as long as it feels
Uh-huh.
good to your partner, like, why not play, have fun,
Indeed.
enjoy each other, enjoy yourselves.
I think Osho was the first one to say, sex is play.
Hmm.
And we love to play in the bedroom. It's not just this holy, sacred tantric thing. You could role model, and very often the things that are the scariest to role model bring the most pleasure, because we love the friction
And
between I really shouldn't be doing this
I,
and I'm going to go ahead and do
naughty,
it.
feeling a little naughty.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Oh, this is so hot because we shouldn't be doing this.
Right, right. Interesting. That's right. I was wondering too if you had any thoughts, Scott, about like practices that you think are helpful for men who and for the maybe their partners as well, like the women and men who love them, right? Um, what practices could they maybe explore? And of course,
In a relationship?
in a relationship, but also on their own,
All right. Well, one
to
of the
open
core
their
wounds.
hearts, to be more balanced with their masculinity, and to embrace their masculine and feminine, any of those things.
All right. So, one of the lessons in relationship that men and women are learning is how to share power,
Mm,
how to both have a voice, how to both have power. And one of the core wounds of most men is shame. I'm not enough. I'm not valid. And the way it translates in relationship is when a man feels that he has to be right about something, that his power is connected to being right, being seen as the boss.
mhm.
So there's a game called the right day game. And in the right day game, let's say you do this twice a week. One day the man gets to be right, the next day his partner gets to be right.
Oh,
And so, on your right day, you could say, look, the moon, there's a piece of green cheese on it. And your partner's practice is to say, yeah, I see it.
great.
Right? So whatever says, so what happens is the whole notion of having to be right dissolves into laughter and play.
Hmm.
And you could really start to get through the exercise, not just the intellect, but through the practice of this, that it's a nonsensical, unimportant question. Who's right? So many arguments can be thwarted by realizing that nobody's right, nobody's wrong, and it's besides the point. It's a distraction from the feelings that are wanting to be heard and
Mm.
expressed.
Comes back to that whole, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Sometimes.
would you rather be right or would you rather be vulnerable?
Yeah. And you're right. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong, and in a sense, everybody's right, everybody's wrong. I mean, we all have aspects of ourselves that are coming from truth and like objective reality, and then we have these other subjective realities and lenses and filters. And just because we're seeing it a different way than our partner doesn't mean they're wrong and we're right, or vice versa. We're
Indeed.
looking at it in
And
a different
honoring other people's point of view
way.
is what creates not just an intimate relationship, but planetary peace.
Yes.
Love that.
Honoring diversity. You wouldn't be attracted to somebody who had the same points of view, the same wounding, the same gifts. There wouldn't be that polarity, that chemistry.
It would be
We
pretty
are, we
boring.
are, the chemistry draws us together, but we really deep down, we're in partnerships to learn, grow, heal with each other and to learn from each other. And there's disowned parts of us that are sleeping, and in intimacy, the other person may act them out, and we get to go from judging them and pushing them away to realizing, oh, that's my anger. They're teaching me to express my anger. I can welcome that.
There's a gift in that. Yeah, and I love too what we're talking about here about keeping curiosity instead of going into that judgment, like wearing the judge robe with the gavel, and that black or white thinking, but just being curious, and I know that like with conflict resolution, I've been practicing this for a long time, and Steve and I don't have a lot of conflicts, but when we do, we're really very good about communicating. And I think it helps to just be curious instead of trying to make your points like, oh, while they're talking, you're sitting there making your next 3 points in your mind of how you're going to crush their argument. That's what so many of us were raised with, and that's what we think is communication. But instead, just be present, start with some appreciation, start with reiterating your commitment, and then be curious about what's
Yeah.
happening, what's driving them to do
Yes.
this behavior, or what's curious about our own triggers. Like, oh, so why am I feeling so triggered when my partner does or doesn't do this or say that. So that curiosity and open-mindedness and acceptance is so important. And I've read a few places, and I think there's some truth to it, that men, one of their deepest needs is to be accepted, and another one is to be purposeful and to feel like they're making a difference. And for women, some of our deepest needs are to be adored and to feel safe. And so when those four key needs are mostly met most of the time, in a beautiful and respectful way, it's just delightful what can be
Yeah.
co-created in relationship. And Scott, I bet you there's some not only amazing partner out there for you, but who knows, that person might even be watching this video right now. And they're like, I need to reach out to this
I
guy.
hope one of our viewers on this sexy and sacred community might become
Yeah.
knocking on your door someday. You never know.
Who knows? I would love to, if it's okay with you guys, to share my spiritual rap. And then I know, Scott, we also really want to hear your music, anything that you would
Yes.
like to share. So I'll do my little rap first, which does not have any musical accompaniment other than the song Within Our Hearts. And then we'd love to hear from the spiritual Dr. Seuss if he would like to make an appearance.
And
Yeah.
listeners, please stay around till the end. You really want to hear his song. And believe me, I have heard a ton of them. And I got to a point one day where I was going through one after another, after another, after another. And
Binge listening.
it was brilliant
So
and
bingeable.
entertaining, just kind of filled all kinds of things up for me. So thank you for the work that you do, Scott, and doing it in such a wonderful way. I'm jealous of your creativity, having a house full of instruments and being a drummer and a musician and blah blah. But uh, I don't have that type of creativity, so it's awesome to see, and everybody needs to see that.
Is very, very gifted. And Stephen, you do have creativity with your photography as well. And
True.
I wouldn't
Look at
even
the background then.
mention the creativity you have with your various body parts that only I get to benefit.
Ah,
That's my personal appreciation.
Yes. They don't call me.
Okay,
They don't
so
call me this.
here's my little spiritual rap for today, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take a moment to explore more deeply, ladies and gents, just exactly what masculinity should mean and has meant. It's not your macho-ness that makes a man, your roughness and gruffness. It's when you put your arms around us, stand for peace, truth, and justice. We love your cocky strength and balls when they're directed with kindness, and we admire your confidence when it's balanced with alignment. So please excuse us if we're cautious because we've been hurt and been burned by toxic men in our lives. So now some trust needs to be earned. Your emotions are beautiful and they make you feel whole. When you let us in your holiness, your soul is our home. You see, your healthy, manly qualities aren't challenges to bear, but rather partnerships, equalities, gifts we can enjoy and share. We all have healing to do, so take our hands and hold our hearts as we will yours, together making love a sacred act and an art.
hmm.
Yay.
Woo!
Wow. And that just came through to you and through you recently.
This
Uh,
morning, in
this morning,
preparation
breakfast.
for
That's so
I just
cool.
I need
yes, you
I,
both
I need to do this
in
this
the
inspired
week.
interest of
this.
time, let's not do it now, but I
This is
invite you to
great.
read it more slowly
More
so
slowly.
that people can digest every line and feel their feelings about every line.
Good. You know what I'll do? Thank you, Dr. Seuss. What I'll do is make a separate YouTube video with that. And Steve, you can hold space and support me with that. Thank you both. where I read it more slowly. And the focus is just on that. So thank you. And you guys are the world premiere, as well as the muses who inspired this. And Steve and I were talking about on our show, sharing more of our creativity and our vulnerability and our passions and things that light us up. So, and for Steve, some of that is sound healing and spiritual mind treatments. And for both of us, it's meditation and healing. And for me, it's poetry. And for both of us, it's music. So just letting all our listeners know we're going to be sharing more of our creative juiciness here. And so this was inspired this morning. I was literally getting ready to go into the bath and I was like, I need to write a poem. A poem wants to come. And at first I was thinking a regular kind of free verse poem like I often write, but no, the rap started coming. I was like, oh, it's a spiritual rap. It's like a Dr. Seuss rap.
Oh,
So I'm
wow.
sure that being, in your vibe, Scott, can
Indeed.
help with that. And of course, Steve, I'm thinking very much of you, largely as this man in my life, and then also of you, Scott, and how you are a voice for this, and that you guys are living examples of this. And I encourage, all the men who are on this awakening path of mindfulness and heartfulness, to cut yourself some slack, give yourself a hug, guys. You're amazing. You're a beautiful, beautiful man. And we love you. And so I'm sending a big hug to all the beautiful awakening men from all of us beautiful awakening women and men. And spin back to the women. Let's hug the women. Yay! Right? We all bless each other. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Anyway, I put some of my things like that on my YouTube. I'll put it in the show notes. And but enough about me. We want to hear from the spiritual Dr. Seuss, whatever magic and mirth and mystery and mayhem you have for us today.
Sure. Well, the first poem that came through me, my daughter was about 2 years old. I had been finishing putting her to bed with Dr. Seuss stories,
There you go.
and I noticed that I kept rhyming in my head. I couldn't turn it off. And so I went to my computer and started to write, and 2 months later, the poem was complete.
Oh,
The first one was called "Oh, the Places Your Ego Will Go." And it talks about the ego, not the way Freud would describe it as just a sense of identity, but the ego in terms of what blocks the giving and receiving of love. The ego in terms of what seeks love and then pushes it away, but doesn't know how to just be love or receive love.
mhm.
The ego that is either our prosecuting attorney or our defense attorney, but never can leave the courtroom and go have a good time. So it's the neurotic ego that I rap about when I do this poem.
All right.
The ego will travel with you on this earth and be your companion for worse or worse. It pretends it's your friend, your bestest amigo. And it pours on the guilt that's the beverage of ego. It's there to protect you, to help you be strong. So it has to remind you you've done it all wrong. You're weak and you're lazy and you don't have a clue. That's your drill sergeant ego trying to motivate you.
Very
Ego
good.
wants you to be all you can be, so it gives you these pep talks all day and for free.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes on. It's about a 6-minute poem.
You can do a bit more. We got a few more minutes. Keep going
Uh,
if you want. Or
let's go to the end.
okay.
One day when you failed and succeeded enough, you witness your ego exposed in the buff.
Woo.
And you realize behind all its protective clothing, the ego's been hiding a state of self-loathing. And beyond that, you realize the biggest of deals. You've dreamt up the ego. It's not even real.
Mm.
So for richer, for poorer, in all kinds of health, You commit to the journey of loving yourself. You realize the love that you searched for outside you is what you are made of and can't be denied you.
Yes.
So you release your potions, your problems, your pills, put some logs on the fire, learn how to chill. Your old superstitions have gone up in smoke, like you can't rest in peace until after you croak.
Ah.
You no longer fear death, or for that matter, life, for you know that all matters are safe and all right.
Very lovely.
One day, I'm just remembering the very end. Um, One fine day, you will soon be inspired to go out in the world with some newfound desires. Desires that spring from your heart and your soul, and wherever they take you, you're going there whole. Because the ego is now in the passenger seat. It lets down the window and takes in the treats. You're not in a hurry. You're going there slow. Because the journey's as rich as the places you'll go. Where you are going, you don't need to know, because the journey's as rich as the places you'll go.
Hooray! Let's just breathe that joy in. What a blessing and blissing.
I'm feeling a lot of gratitude at this moment. Um, just being able to reflect upon what you're saying and see it from the vantage point of, and I get to sit here and listen to this live with you and with Sage, and at the same point, I can identify with everything in that, and just it's like I'm gonna have to go to my chiropractor because I'm nodding too much, hurting my neck, saying yes to all this stuff. So thank you, very good.
Oh, thank you, Scott. Um, I would love for you to be able to share with everyone where they can find out more about what you do. Of course, your book is on Amazon, but you may also have some other
Yeah, you could,
places.
on Amazon, you can search for Mindful Masculinity, Scott Grace.
Perfect. And then you also have a website. Is it Scott Songs?
ScottSongs.com.
Songs.com.
And YouTube and my Facebook channel are where I put the most of my attention.
Great. What's your Facebook channel?
I forget.
Okay, you just said
Scott K. Grace, my middle initial K. I think if you Google that, it'll come up.
we'll put it, if you can send it to us, we'll put it in the show notes. So anyone who wants
Sounds good.
that can just go
But
look.
YouTube is my favorite form of expression.
Yay! That's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's fantastic. And do you have any other final and eternal words of wisdom that will reverberate forever into the cyberverse here to complete our show today? Anything else either of you would like to share?
How about we do this in spontaneous poetry?
Gorgeous.
So this is just be coming through in the moment. Thank you so much for inviting me. Interviews like this are my cup of tea. And I don't need any caffeine because speaking my truth is living my dream. The sexy and sacred, beautiful show where we don't try to know things, we go with the flow. You don't have to sit here and take good notes because we're just helping you open up your heart and your throat so you can find your truth behind the mind chatter and realize what does and what doesn't matter. Take off that mask with an M-A-S-K and just explore truth like you're really okay, like there's nothing wrong with you for being a man. It's part of the universal divine plan. It's not about finding what's wrong with you to fix. It's about finding what's right about you and putting that in the mix and mixing it up and blending it through. Put it in the oven and watch it be you. Watch it rise up. Watch yourself do the rising. No more needing to fix, no more stuff to disguising. Take off your disguise, your Superman cape, and be you who you are, and you will be great. You'll be so hot, you'll have 24 dates. Because you start from the heart and you celebrate. You celebrate you, then the rest of the world, all the women, the men, the boys, and the girls will join in the dance of your self-celebration, and your ego will just take a long-term vacation. And we heal in ourselves, and we heal our whole nation, and we heal the whole world with our self-celebration. So, thank you, Sex and Sacred Show. I know this is time, and I've got to go.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much.
I think we just scraped the surface on a little bit here. I hope we can have you back again one of these times and maybe expand on a few things. I know I came up with all kinds of questions. I was kind of keeping my mouth zipped most of the time because I'm like, I have 1,000 things questions and blah, blah. So anyway, hopefully we'll see.
Yeah, it's a beautiful topic, and there's just so much to explore about living and loving and creativity and being all of who we are and letting our light shine. And thank you so much, Scott, for your soulful songs and your heartful, mindful wisdom and words of love. And everybody should run, not walk, to Amazon and buy Mindful Masculinity. The only thing you should do first before you do that is maybe make a list of all the people you know who need that book and will benefit from that book, women as well as men. Anyone who basically is either male or has a male in their life, that's who needs that book.
Yes.
So that's about 8 billion people. So your sales are going to skyrocket, as well they should. And we look forward to connecting with you more. Thank you, Scott. Thank you,
You're so welcome.
for being the sexy and sacred co-host and delightful being and man and masculine and feminine and mindful, heartful, soulful partner in my life. And thank you to all of our listeners and listeners. And please go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, and share and connect with us over at our Facebook group, which is free and open to everyone. And that is the Sexy and Sacred Community. And you also have a bunch of links to explore, follow your intuition, and have fun and keep being who you are, because you are amazing and lovable. We'll see you next time on our next show. We're going to be talking a lot about orgasms pretty soon, in case that might be of interest.
You don't have to sell them.
dropping a little seed, but
Yeah.
Bye, everybody. Lots of love. See you soon. Thanks again.
Thanks for being part of our growing community at the Sexy and Sacred Show. Please share the love, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and catch us next time at your favorite podcast platform. Until then, remember, you are sexy and you are sacred.